went to the wrap party, that this was it for the Andy Griffith Show.
Ron Howard may have been the red-headed darling of the Andy Griffith Show, but behind Mayberry's perfect picket fences, life was far from picture perfect. On screen, it looked like a tight-knit small-town family. Off-screen, a very different story. Sure, Howard shared laughs with Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, but there was one cast member he quietly loathed, and he wasn't alone. That same person sparked the one feud even Andy Griffith couldn't forgive. The tension was real, the resentment ran deep, and for decades, it stayed hidden, until now. This is the story of the castmate who quietly drove a wedge behind the curtain of Mayberry. The show may be remembered as one of television's most wholesome and nostalgic sitcoms, but behind that sweet Southern charm lay a world far more complex. Premiering in 1960 and running through 1968, The Andy Griffith Show delivered 249 half-hour episodes, blending humor with homespun wisdom. But the show that appeared simple was anything but. It all started with a backdoor pilot on The Danny Thomas Show, introducing Sheriff Andy Taylor, a widowed lawman raising his son, Opie, played by a young Ron Howard. Though fictional, the town of Mayberry felt like a memory, capturing the spirit of the 1930s more than the turbulent 60s in which it aired. Audiences fell in love with the ensemble. Barney Fife's hilariously inept policing, Aunt Bee's warm wisdom, and Opie's precocious heart. But while the show seemed like a family on screen, behind the camera, things weren't so harmonious. Egos clashed. Personalities collided. And one feud in particular, between Andy Griffith and his co-star Francis Bavier, was far more intense than fans ever suspected. It wasn't public, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. Hidden in smiles, buried beneath scripts, this rift became part of the show's shadow legacy. Still, The Andy Griffith Show was a cultural juggernaut. It never dipped below 7th place in the Nielsen ratings, and in a rare feat, it ended its final season at number 1, joining the ranks of I Love Lucy and Seinfeld. Don Knotts and Francis Bavier racked up 6 Emmys. The spin-offs kept coming, and fans still celebrate Mayberry and Griffith's real hometown. But while the myth of Mayberry lived on, one little boy on set was already preparing for life beyond fishing poles and front porches. Ron Howard, born in 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma, was Hollywood-bred from the start. His father, Rance, was an actor, and his mother, Jean, an actress. Ron was on set before he could spell, and by age 5 he was already building a resume that would make grown actors jealous. Roles in The Twilight Zone, Dennis the Menace, and more. But in 1960 he landed the role that changed everything, Opie Taylor. Credited as Ronnie Howard, he played the sheriff's son with warmth and charm that won America's heart. He once said his first memory on set was being obsessed with a toy turtle he had to pretend was dead. He was just a kid, figuring it out as he went. But the tone on set, gentle, warm, grounded, reflected everything the show tried to be. Even so, behind that tone, real tensions simmered, notably the one with Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee. While her character served as the emotional anchor of the Taylor household, Bavier herself was notoriously private, often cold and difficult to work with. Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass and directed several episodes, said working with Bavier felt like walking on landmines. Even a minor camera adjustment could spark confrontation. She had high standards and didn't tolerate compromise. Griffith once tried to reconcile with her by showing up unannounced at her home. She didn't appreciate it. The gesture only deepened the rift. But near the end of her life, Bavier picked up the phone and called Griffith. She apologized. She admitted she'd been difficult, said the tension was her fault, and acknowledged his leadership. It was a powerful, overdue moment of peace. Bavier passed away in 1989 at age 86 in a small North Carolina town, not far from the fictional Mayberry where she'd lived on screen. Griffith would also live to 86, passing away quietly in his North Carolina home. Their deaths marked the end of an era, but also reminded fans that even the most polished shows can hide fractured truths beneath the surface. And while The Andy Griffith Show marked the beginning of Ron Howard's journey, another equally remarkable story was taking shape: his love with Cheryl Howard. In an industry where relationships fall apart under the spotlight, theirs stood firm. On June 7, 2025, they celebrated 50 years of marriage. No tabloid drama, no scandals, just decades of growing, adapting, and continuing to choose each other. They met at 16. Their first date, a movie and pizza in Ron's mint green Volkswagen Beetle. Years later, that same car still ran, and so did their love. They married in 1975, despite Cheryl initially saying no to his first two proposals. She wanted to finish school, build her own life. And when she was ready, they built a life together that would last. 4 children, including Bryce and Paige, who followed in their creative footsteps. Cheryl became the heart of the Howard family, a grounding presence that Ron never took for granted. On their anniversary, he described their journey like a river: calm waters, tricky rapids, but always paddling together. Their story wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was real, steady, and enduring. While Ron's personal life stayed grounded, his professional journey soared. He transitioned from child actor to director, earning respect from Hollywood heavyweights. Starting with Grand Theft Auto in 1977, a project born from a deal to direct if he starred in Eat My Dust, he proved he had a vision beyond the frame. He delivered hits like Splash, Willow, and Apollo 13, but it was a beautiful mind that turned everything. The film swept the Oscars, earning him Best Director and Best Picture, but it wasn't without backlash. Critics pointed out the parts of John Nash's life that were omitted: his bisexuality, an abandoned child, troubling behavior, all left out. Howard said he made those cuts to focus the story. Still, controversy followed. Years later, Howard faced another storm after directing Hillbilly Elegy, based on J.D. Vance's memoir. At the time, Vance wasn't a politician, but as Vance's rhetoric grew louder and more divisive, Howard grew quietly disillusioned. He'd believed in the story, the resilience, the humanity. But now, he didn't recognize the man at its center. Howard never lashed out. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes. The shift wasn't political, it was personal. Just like years earlier when he'd been a boy working with Francis Bavier. Back then, he'd learned what it felt like to be belittled, made to feel small by someone who smiled on screen but never warmed to him in real life. That same sting resurfaced with Vance. It wasn't about politics. It was about trust, about thinking you knew someone, only to watch them become unrecognizable. Even now, Howard doesn't get bitter. He reflects. He learns. From uncomfortable beginnings to Oscar wins and decades of trust in an unforgiving industry, he's learned to pick his moments. And when he speaks, it matters. He reminds us to think critically, to question what we're being sold, and to vote with our eyes open. Because in the end, the stories we believe today become the headlines we wake up to tomorrow. And if anyone knows how easily a character can fool an audience, it's Ron Howard. He's seen it on screen, on set, and now on the national stage. Ron Howard's journey isn't just a Hollywood success story. It's a masterclass in longevity, adaptation, and integrity. From his earliest days as the freckled-faced Opie in The Andy Griffith Show, he grew up in the limelight. He saw the price of fame early, learning how to navigate egos, pressure, and the crushing expectations that can eat child actors alive. Most don't make it out, but Howard didn't just survive. He thrived. He transitioned into a new identity on Happy Days, winning over a different generation as Richie Cunningham. While many actors tried and failed to evolve, Howard didn't cling to the spotlight. Instead, he stepped behind the camera, where he quietly but powerfully reshaped his career. And he wasn't just good, he was great. A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13, Cinderella Man, Frost, Nixon, Rush, The Da Vinci Code, Parenthood, Backdraft, Willow, the list of films he directed spans genres, tones, and decades. What's even more remarkable is how consistent his work ethic remained. Ron Howard doesn't have the flash of a Tarantino or the mystery of a Nolan, but he has something harder to find: trust. Studios trust him. Actors trust him. Audiences trust him. Because he shows up. He delivers. He tells stories with care, with humanity, and with a deep understanding of how to bring emotion to the screen without shouting. But that steady hand was forged in friction. Being on a show like The Andy Griffith Show at such a young age could have ruined him. It nearly did. Working alongside a cast of professionals as a child meant Ron had to learn the unspoken rules of adult dynamics fast, and not every co-star made it easy. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, was notoriously cold to him. The warmth you saw on screen, pure acting. Behind the scenes, there was tension, distance, and a quiet hurt that young Ron would carry long after the show ended. But instead of lashing out or letting that experience define him, he turned it into understanding, into perspective, into growth. He learned what kind of colleague not to be, what kind of director he could be, and what kind of leader sets the tone on a set. That empathy would show up again and again in his films. He doesn't just tell stories. He tells human stories, stories where people struggle, break, rebuild, and triumph, not through perfection, but through perseverance. He gives actors room to breathe, to explore, to find the truth in their characters. Just ask Tom Hanks, who's worked with him on multiple films, or Russell Crowe, or Michael Keaton, or Daryl Hannah. There's a reason top-tier talent keeps coming back to work with him. Howard isn't just a director. He's a collaborator, a storyteller's storyteller. And while many in Hollywood chase trends or get swallowed by ego, Howard stays focused. He doesn't need viral moments or controversy to stay relevant. He lets the work speak. And yet, when the moment does call for him to speak, like it did with J.D. Vance, he does so with precision. With disappointment, yes, but not rage. He doesn't rant. He reminds. He reflects. And that's more powerful than any headline. That's not to say he's avoided all criticism. Far from it. A Beautiful Mind, for all its accolades, faced backlash for omitting parts of John Nash's life. Critics accused him of sanitizing the story. Howard listened. He didn't hide. He explained his choices, not to justify, but to clarify. And while the debate around historical accuracy in films is ongoing, one thing is certain. Howard cares. Not just about the story, but about the impact of that story. He's not afraid to acknowledge complexity. In fact, he seeks it out. That nuance has never been more important than now, in a time when truth feels increasingly slippery, when narratives are weaponized, and when the line between fact and fiction is often blurred for political gain. Howard's voice cuts through that noise, not with volume, but with clarity. He doesn't tell you what to think. He asks you to think at all. That alone sets him apart in today's cultural climate. And then there's the love story. Ron and Cheryl Howard. 50 years of marriage in a town that often chews up relationships and spits them out. No scandals, no drama. Just quiet, consistent, real love. It's not the kind of story that makes tabloid covers, but it's the kind that builds legacies. They met at 16, married at 21, built a life, a family, and a partnership that's weathered every kind of storm. Their love is rooted not in grand gestures, but in the everyday moments. The small things, the steady support, the shared vision. In a world addicted to spectacle, the Howards have chosen substance. That's rare, and it matters. So when Ron Howard speaks, whether through a film, an interview, or a simple social post, it carries weight. Because it comes from a man who's walked the walk. He's seen the business at its best and its worst. He's worked with legends, directed icons, and remained grounded through it all. He's made mistakes, learned from them, and kept moving forward. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. He's living proof that kindness and ambition aren't mutually exclusive, that you can be powerful without being loud, that you can lead without controlling, and that you can be fiercely successful without ever losing sight of who you are. So here's the real question. What will Ron Howard do next? Because something tells us he's not done, not even close. Whether it's another Oscar contender, a limited series, a documentary, or even a surprise acting return, Howard still has stories to tell. And if his past is any indication, those stories will challenge us, they'll move us, and they'll stick with us long after the credits roll. Howard has never been one to chase trends. He sets his own pace, chooses projects deliberately, and puts purpose before spectacle. In a media landscape that's constantly shifting, where attention spans shrink and algorithms decide visibility, his career is a quiet rebellion. He doesn't need to reinvent himself every 5 years to stay relevant. He evolves naturally, in sync with the times, yet always grounded in timeless storytelling values. That's why his next move matters, not just to film buffs or critics, but to anyone who values authenticity in art. Take his recent turn toward documentaries. Projects like Pavarotti, Rebuilding Paradise, and We Feed People reveal another dimension of Howard's storytelling. Real people, real stakes, and real hope. These aren't vanity projects. They're deeply human stories with a clear mission: to inform, to inspire, to connect. It's a space where his empathy shines even brighter. And it wouldn't be surprising if we see him return to that format again soon, especially in a world that's desperate for truth and nuance. Or maybe he'll return to the kind of character-driven drama that earned him Oscars. Think Frost, Nixon, or A Beautiful Mind. With the current state of global politics, social unrest, and cultural shifts, there's no shortage of compelling figures whose stories demand thoughtful cinematic treatment. And if there's anyone who knows how to navigate controversial topics with grace and balance, it's Howard. There's also been quiet talk in industry circles, whispers really, that Howard could finally make his long-anticipated science fiction epic. It's a genre he's only touched on briefly with Willow and parts of Apollo 13, but fans and collaborators alike have speculated that he's had a larger, more ambitious idea brewing for years. Whether it's based on an original concept or a bold adaptation, one thing is clear. If Howard steps into sci-fi again, it won't be just about visuals. It'll be about meaning, about character, about heart. And let's not forget his legacy as a mentor. Behind the scenes, Howard has been quietly supporting the next generation of filmmakers. Through Imagine Entertainment, which he co-founded with Brian Grazer, he's produced dozens of films and series, many of which have spotlighted fresh voices. His commitment to elevating diverse stories and new talent speaks volumes. That may be his greatest impact yet. Not just the stories he's told, but the storytellers he's empowered. So yes, Ron Howard still has work to do, still has people to inspire, still has truths to reveal, through scripts, through lenses, through the kind of quiet leadership that this noisy world desperately needs. So which Ron Howard movie have you seen? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out the next video. Because this story